To Threads of Enlightenment. My name is Ken Primus. I am your host. I wanted to let you guys know about this particular episode. To me, it's a very special episode. I had invited Jay Allen of the Jay Allen Show to come in and do an interview with me. And he actually turned the table on me, and he actually interviewed me in the middle of our conversation. And I wanted to take a chance, and I actually thank him for that because I've never really been interviewed before. But I wanted to let you guys hear my story just so that you can get a better understanding of who I am, how I got to where I am today, what stage steps and all these different tools that I use to get me to my place through conversation at the site that as I invite other people, you and I would all get there together. We would grow together. I wanted to welcome you guys, and I hope you enjoy the show that Jay and I had done, and so that you will get a chance to know who I am. And again, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, and enjoy this particular episode. Thanks. Excellent. I'll let you know what Threads of Enlightenment is about. I believe that, Jay, each and every one of us has a journey that we take. And as we take that journey, we gain wisdom, insights. We gain those insights through hardships, challenges that come our way. And what tools we use to overcome those challenges, that's the type of stuff I want to talk about so that we can help people in that process. They're going through that process of the title Threads of Enlightenment, these threads that happen in our lives through circumstances that come in. We get enlightenment from anyone. I mean, it could be a kid that comes and says something to us, or I used to use the example when I had my children when they were young boys. I would say respect everyone, including that a homeless person you see, because they may come and whisper something to you that is the key that you needed to take you for the next 30 years of your life. And so you have to respect everyone, because we all are on this collective journey, whether it's separately or not, but we are collectively going somewhere. And so we can actually help each other along that way. So,
well, it's funny that you say that. I kind of chuckle almost at the same time as you're saying this, especially when you start using the example of when you were talking to your children, even if it could actually interact with a homeless person. When you start thinking about it, think about the different cultures throughout the world on how wisdom is respected.
Exactly.
In the U.S., when you get older, to some extent, there is some level where people kind of make fun of the elderly, just kind of the way that it works out. But when you go to different cultures and different countries, the respect level that is put onto the elderly, they are the wise person in the room.
Yes.
They are the person to go into and having those conversations of, hey, I'm at a life fork. What do I do now? It's a definitely interesting concept on how you have this set up.
Yeah, and I believe that all of us are computers. And I have 4 boys. And so from their youth, I would tell them, I am a computer. You are a computer. I am simply ahead of you on that timeline that we're living. As you get older and I get older, I have collected data. You have collected data. And when necessary, you can come and tap into my database for whatever data you need for that specific circumstances that you're going through. And my hope is that you will, from collecting my data, that you will not stay a minute longer in that situation that you are in currently. And it's not for me to say, do this, do that. That's not my place as a father that has. When they were younger, I could have done that. But as they become grown men, I am simply that computer that you tap into, and you make your decision based on the data that you've collected from me and from other people.
Oh, you know that's gonna raise a whole bunch of questions with you saying that. It's a good analogy.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: when you start thinking about this, if we start talking about the world of computers, do you look at it as that you're your own individual computer, or we're all kind of in a virtual reality standpoint? Because there's different ways that we could almost go about this.
Yeah.
As you start talking about it, so how do you look at it? Do you look at it as your own individual network, or do you look at it as the whole virtual reality side? Because I've read books on different subjects that are very on very similar things.
Yes.
So that's why I asked.
I believe it's a combination of both.
Okay.
And that's where you have, I think, a film like The Matrix is a powerful film if you understand what you're looking at. And it talks about the catalyst that makes you and I or someone drive past their current situation. And that is faith in yourself and faith that this thing that you want is it's a tangible thing and you can taste it. And so beyond what that problem is, and I will always say to people, make your vision bigger than you, because at some point you're going to get tired, and your vision have to be big enough to make you go, you know what, I'm tired, but I'm going to take one step towards. And when you make it that big, you will move. If you don't move, you're stagnant.
Well, that means your dream's not big enough. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Well, it's interesting because you tie in the Matrix, because a lot of people, when we start through this conversation, it's very similar because it will go into the Matrix aspect of it, because there's a lot of philosophy tied into it. There's a lot of theology tied into that movie, depending on how you take a look at it. There had been so much research when that movie was made. Now, I'll tell you, I actually encountered a book many years ago by the name of My Big Toe. It's a trilogy. It's a trilogy book, but it's My Big Theory of Everything, but they call it My Big Toe. And it's interesting because the guy does talk about how the Matrix does tie into some of the aspects of the world that we're in based on his reality. Yeah. Now, he's an astrophysicist, so it's kind of hard to one of those things that when you start reading it going, well, hold on, this guy really understands some things. So what is he telling us? But as you take the deeper dive inside of the book, he talks about how there's rule sets inside of the world or the computer programming, and they're limited. So you might see this, you might see that, but it's because of the rule sets that are actually inside of the system. So you might actually, we'll say, quote unquote, plateau to a certain section because this world's divided by this rule sets that's set up. So like if you try to jump off in a building and try to fly, probably not going to work because that's not part of the rule set of what you're supposed to do. Now, I'm not going to say, hey, you can crack the code and you're going to start flying based on what the guy said. At least he didn't go that far. But he does go into the whole mentality thing where he almost talks about that there's different timelines.
Exactly.
And what he talks about is that even though you are currently living in this portion of your reality where you and I are talking, even though it's via the internet, there might be another reality that you could tap into where there's a different timeline where we could potentially be doing this in person.
Exactly.
And it's very interesting on how he ties them all in together, but he goes into a lot of theory. Now, I'm going to tell you, it does read like a textbook. So it's not an easy read. I wouldn't say, hey, if you're half asleep and you want to read something, that's the one to go to. Definitely not the one. But it has a lot of good information inside of there. Yeah. But he goes into the whole concept there about the rule set. But when he goes into the rule set, he starts talking more about computer programming. And the thing that he uses a lot of the examples of, going a little geeky for a moment, is the World of Warcraft and about how much power the system uses to generate some of the things that are there.
Yes.
And then he goes as far as talking about when people see ghosts, when people see aliens, he talks about how they're fractals, almost similar to how they talk about in the Matrix of other programs that there's an error. And that's why people see these things. So that whole conversation, I've looked at those books. I've probably read them 3 or 4 times over. It's over 1,000 pages easily.
Oh, wow.
In that particular regard. And I even went to a meeting that the guy conducted in a different state just to be able to see the guy, because I was very intrigued on what he had to say. But I look at this, and if you take a look at, we can talk about religion, we can talk about faith, we can talk about the different things, and they all have some similarities to how they work. They all have some similarities into also computer programming.
Exactly.
And he goes as far as he talks about this one portion, and I know that a lot of people won't love it, but I'll reference it, is that when you look at someone to be praised, that is more of a man-made thing instead of a godlike thing, because people want to be cheered.
Yes.
And he says that does not sound like something that a god would bring your direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought that was an interesting concept. So I'd love to hear what you think about that.
Oh, when you even take that down further to a quantum physics level, and you look into that aspect of the things that we manifest and the power of the thought. My background is a Christian background, and I like going into some of the things that Jesus would say and all these type of stuff. And he says this thing to his disciples, Jay, one day that when I was reading it, I was like, wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. He says, take no thought saying. And so I remember repeating that over and over and over and over until it hit me, because you and I, and I remember I had to go before a group of men to teach them in a prison. And I had said to them, all of you guys are here because you could not, you weren't able to manage a thought that someone gave to you. And they looked at me like they wanted to take me out. And when I began to explain to them that we took the thought, you and I took that thought, those words that someone said to us I just whisper this sound wave type thing, and it comes out of the words to you, and you took it and you place it into your belief system, and you say, yeah, let's do that. Let's rob a bank. Let's whatever. And now you took ownership of someone else's words. I went into the quantum piece, and I was talking about how we create and how creation runs at that level, and it comes to the place in the arena that you and I can see that is in that thought life, and that's where it manifests to us. And we begin to take these things, form ideas, form dreams, and then begin to act on all of these things and change our life. And so I love the topic of talking about, and I actually wrote a book, Threads of Enlightenment, because for me, and I wrote that when I was running around in the streets of Orlando partying and I had my kids.
You were learning
exactly.
At the time.
I was actually learning about those principles. And I actually, Jay, I actually took mental note of what was happening to me at that time. And then when I went inside and I started writing about it, and I realized that I was in certain states, I call them states. And in these states, we manifest things. And if we learn to recognize where we are, then we'll be able to manage it easier. I had to go through a process to love myself. I actually, the first half of my life was guilt. I lived by guilt. And then when I learned that, hey, I got to learn to love me. I stopped partying with all my friends. I dated myself for 1 year, meaning I went to the movies, I went sushi. And some of the best stories I've ever had in my life was when I was by myself, learning to figure out who I was. Because my concept and my thought is that once I have come to that place, I'm facing all my demons, Jay. I'm facing every idea, every thought, every bad thing, every good thing. And then when you come out there, you stand naked. You come out that much better. You appreciate who you are. I can look at you now, Jay, and I don't care what you do, because I know who I am. I can look at you and say, I can have that empathy and say, he may be, I don't know where he is, but he's on his journey, and we respect each other from that place. And I think that's what's missing in our society. We need to learn how to respect each other from a place of personal growth. We're all on this journey. As we started the conversation, that collective mainframe that we're all hooked up to. And yet we are this individual piece, but we are connected to this mainframe, and we're connected through everything, the earth, nature, everybody's all connected, Well,
I mean, it's interesting that you say that, because I've done more research in regards of relationships and taking a look on how the human brain works. I think a lot of people miss out on that whole aspect where you said that you dated yourself for a year. And what I mean by that is that sometimes people don't look that they have to love themselves first.
Yes, sir.
Before they can go into a relationship and bring additional value.
Exactly.
Because here's the thing, it's the codependency portion where if you don't actually value yourself or realize what you're bringing into a relationship, all of a sudden you're leaning on somebody else to give you self-worth.
Yes.
And it becomes an error to an extent for a lot of relationships and a lot of failure because let's say, for instance, I'm in a relationship, I get close to someone and all of a sudden now they're busy with work. They're not paying a lot of attention to me. Something else is going on. Do I start looking elsewhere because I don't know my own value?
Correct.
And that's a lot of hesitation and a lot of problems that people have. You see a lot, and I'm not judging here, but you see people flip through relationships because of this. Not that they didn't love the person that all of a sudden started to work more, but they're not getting the attention that they needed. They're not having their needs met. So they feel, I need to jump out and do something else. Whereas what you did, where you went out for a year and understood who the true you was, it brings a different mindset. Now, what I think that's kind of funny about the whole thing too, is that during that time, most people would be like, well, what about interacting with someone else? What about being with someone else? No, you're learning about yourself. Yes, is there still a need about physical contact and things to that extent? Absolutely. I'm not saying that there's not, but it's understanding who you truly are. And what people tend to forget, and self included, is how you need to be thankful for everything that goes on inside of your journey. I always chuckle because I'll say that Christianity and religion played a big part of my youth when I was growing up. And I always look back and I laugh because the first scripture I ever learned was 1 Thessalonians 5:18. And everything gives thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. And it's kind of funny because I've looked at that throughout the years and realized that even regardless of the toughest times in life, you should be thankful.
Exactly.
And I mean, and you can look at it from the universe aspect, you can look at it from a God aspect, however you want to look at it. But it's that mindset.
Correct.
It's that learning that's going on in that particular moment that's the crucial part.
Exactly.
It might suck. It might suck terribly in regards of going through it. But there's something that you need to learn. Some people look at life at wins and loss. I think it's more of a win and learn. It took me a while to get there. But there's always a learning. And a year being by yourself, is it the greatest when you look at it from the outside? No, but you learned about yourself. I mean, you were in Orlando. You're now in a totally different country. So you took a risk on you. Because you knew yourself, where somebody who's not comfortable with themselves, well, unless this person or that person comes with me, I'm not doing it.
It is so true, because I think you're not picking on anyone. I think it is one of the major demise of relationships. Because my concept is this: how are you going to love me who have all these demons if you don't love yourself? Now, if you love yourself, you can empathize with how you feel, how you go through things. And that same empathy you can then give to your mate, to give them the space that they need to encounter themselves. And I think that's the springboard that you and I and everyone have to face. Because after you've gone through that, I think there's everything and anything that comes your way. I think you're going to be successful at it because you have worked on the most important individual in the world to get to a place that you can now manage everything else. And once you've learned how to change your perspective, like you mentioned that scripture is about perspective in every situation. And if you focus your perspective, and most people this is where they fall, they don't change their perspective. If you change your perspective with this current situation that you're in, you're going to start tapping into different parts of you, of your being, that you will get answers. You will pull people to you because you're no longer bogged down or depressed or whatever. You've now changed your perspective, and you're looking at yourself going, I'm out of this stuff. I'm calling and pulling those people that have the wisdom. Jay may walk by and say, hey, Ken, hey, how you doing, man? And that conversation from you can pull me out because I've changed my perspective. I'm not depressed, and I'm not standing there, you're looking at why is so depressed. But I believe the key to many of our situation is the changing of our perspective in that situation, because then we can I want to say bring the other forces at bear to help us to overcome that situation and come out of it much faster.
Well, Ken, let me ask you, because when you went through this and you decided to go on the year on your own, how did you do the mindset? How did you change it? Because here's the thing. If you tell that to someone else, automatically, because of the society that we live in nowadays, you're doing that because you're a narcissist.
Yep.
That's going to be what people would expect or people would say. So how were you able to break the mental model or the mental stronghold? And we can even go as far as the spiritual stronghold of saying, I'm going to do this and take this risk on me.
I learned this. I saw this, and I remember saying it to my boys. I would tell them that you and I are endangered species. You look at yourself in the mirror. There is no other being like you on this planet, and there's industries to prove that. You have fingerprinting, face recognition. You have all those things. You're that special. And so I had to look at myself and make a decision that if I am that special, then I need to spend the time that is necessary to get to know who I am. I am not perfect, and I think society is driving us and to become perfect. And we see that by looks, people getting Botox. They have this thing in their head, and they're pushing towards this thing of perfection. There is no such thing as perfection, but there's this thing as accepting who you are, loving who you are. I spoke to my friends and I told them, I'm not going to date anyone. I don't mind coming out with you guys and hanging out, and I'm not dating. I'm not interested. And when people would come to me, girls would come to me, I'd say, look, I'm on a hiatus. I'm not. And we would have that conversation. And my friend, one of my best friend, Tony, years after I did that, when he was in a situation and he came out and he said, you know what, I'm going to do that. And after he came out of that year, he said, man, when you did that initially, I thought you were, we all thought you were out of your mind. But he said, now
I'd be like, you're playing the field, you're just not telling anyone.
He said, now I see the value of what you did because it changed my life. And I think we ought to spend that time. We're an endangered species. You're one of a kind, my brother. When you're gone, you're gone. There's no other fingerprint that will match yours on this planet. And so we have to realize the value of who we are.
But it's interesting that you're able to do this, or you were able to pull this off, because as I look at the world around us, we're lucky enough to be in an older demo. And I say that with the best of ways, because right now, people that are growing up in the now generation, they almost have a dual life. And let me explain what I mean by that. You have this world that we live in, that we do normal things, the physical, that it's there. But then you have the social media world. You have this digital world. And if I look at what we call the social media influencers, they're jet planing, they're at the best parties in the world, they're eating gourmet food. Nobody has the difficulty that real world has, based on what I see on social media. If I go based on that, I mean, I'm trying to go into your example with Botox and everything to that extent. Everybody looks perfect. Everybody's on a private jet. They're doing all the best of best, but everything's also recorded. Everything also is, I can go back years later and take a look at this. So I think that it's a difficult thing to be able to pull off. So when you went through this journey and you said, I'm taking the year hiatus because I want to focus on myself. If you were big into social media, or if social media would have been big at the time, would that have been something you would have journaled?
See, and that's the thing that people do. I usually, I would fast, and it's for personal reasons, not because of anything. I would fast 30 days every year, and I would pick a month whenever I would do that, and I would.
If you were in Florida, that was not a summer month, that's for sure.
I did it actually when I fasted. My kids would come over my house because the way how I handled my fasting was cooking, so they would come over and just eat because that's how I would be able to deal with it. And I never tasted anything, but I just cook and they would be there. And what I did then was I had journaled what I did, and I did that one year, and I remember the second year I didn't, because I thought, no, This is not about sharing about that. This is for me to find answers, to get seriousness, to break through from cycles, to become seriously introspective. And I don't know, I've been traveling a little, Jay, and I'm seeing these young kids they're in a restaurant, selfies come out, selfie, and I don't know. It's a good question, sir. I don't know today if because they're so programmed that you have to be a special person to unhook. I don't know if they know how to do that today. It's a sad thing. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because I take a look around, and it's not judgmental. No. I don't want it to come across that way. It's that difficulty in duality.
Yes.
Because it's a dual life. Because I will tell you, I have growing pains. I have things that I go through that are not perfect. But I don't try to only post the perfect stuff. If I post it, I really don't try to post anything at all, to be honest. But if I'm going to, I don't want to post only the bad things, or I don't want to post only the good things. I want people to know that there's a real life that occurs.
Yeah.
And it's not all about social media. I mean, social media, and I know that that's going to sound, oh, you sound like an old guy. The bad social media. No, I think that there's some importance there that you need to bring some reality from your life into what's going on in social if you're going to go that angle. But it boils down to a couple of different things. And I want to go back a little bit to where we started about that whole computer aspect. You're learning and you're gathering information, you're sharing details. I don't want somebody's life to change because of what I went through. I want to be able to share my experiences, and you take what you want out of it.
Exactly.
Because the worst thing that I could do is what people kind of pushed upon me. This is the way that it is. That's the only way it's going to work. That's the worst way to try to assist or train someone or give them information.
Oh, you can see that.
Here's what I did.
Teenagers rebel.
Right.
Right.
I mean, it was like, here's what I've done. This is what's worked for me. I can't guarantee that it'll work for everybody. I have some ideas. You can do whatever you want. And that's the learning aspect of the computer. But I look at it as what I was talking about that book at the very beginning, and how this gentleman talked about these different realities that could go on at the same time. And it's the shoulda, coulda, woulda. And I look at it and I go, well, I made this decision, and this is the decision I decided to move forward with. Now I can sit back and go, hey, maybe there is a timeline where that reality is different, but I don't ever want to look at my life in retrospect and say, hey, this is what I should have done. Because if I wanted to go to what I thought it should have been, then I'm going to change things that are going on currently to get me there. And I feel that that's what you did. Things weren't working out the way that you wanted to. And you said, hey, I'm going to take this year and do it. Now, have you ever thought, and I'm just asking about this, of possibly doing an assistance guide for other people that might want to do this?
I've actually never thought about it, but I remember, like I said, I remember telling my friends, the people that were close to me, they knew. My friend, as I mentioned to you, he knew, and he came back several years later. Before he started that journey, he and I talked about some of the things that I encountered there, and I was telling him that you need to do this because at the end of this time, you will look back and go, wow, why didn't I do this earlier? And I've had that experience with several people after that from people talking with me, and I've always mentioned that aspect of taking that time to get to know me, because until then, I find myself, I was living to please my parents. I was living to please this and that. But I didn't know the core of who I was and what made me tick, what I didn't like, what were my triggers, so I started investigating those things within myself. Why did you make that decision, Ken? I would ask myself after I've done that. And I would sit down and analyze that. What happened? What data did you collect? And as I began to understand the process by how I make a decision, I was able to change some of that. I was able to enhance some of it. Some of them I still keep. And those are where we form our habits. Our habits are our lifestyles. And so we need to, this is a place that I really feel that a lot of people need to, they try to bypass that to start their journey, but you can't. Your journey will be I don't want to say imperfect, but you will have tremendous time. You'll find yourself in loops, in other words, until you come back to that first place.
So when you start thinking about doing this, from the time that you started thinking about it to the time that you actually pulled the trigger to do it, how long was there a time in between?
It was about a month or so, because I knew at the time my lifestyle would change. I was partying, Jay. I was partying with the boys and doing all this.
That means so many different things to different people, so I don't even know what to say there.
This was back in the day in Orlando, when Orlando was the place to be. People would come from all over the world to hang out in Orlando because,
they still do.
because of some of the best DJs and all those guys were there. This was in the midst of this back in the 90s. In the midst of that, I looked at my friends and I'm like, I got to do this, because I was going from one relationship to another, this person, that person. I was like, you know what? I need time to see who I am. And it was the best decision that I ever made. My kids will tell you, I used to walk around and kiss myself. I kiss my hand, and because I started to learn some of the things that I was carrying was unnecessary. And so I had to learn how to let them go, how to part with them. I would tell people I ran into some of my fears and we split. We broke up, and you would come in contact with some of these the dark things that they say are demons, and I would have conversations with them and say it's time for me to move on. A pleasure. Thank you for bringing me to this place. It is time for a new creation. And I would literally have these conversations with myself. So it was really an interesting, now that you put it that way, it's interesting looking back at it that I was able to pull that off.
So at the time, I'm just kind of curious, because I would like to understand it a little bit better. You referenced that you've always believed, that you've had Christianity inside of your life, but now you're having this approach in computer where some people think about this as, we'll say, New Age, because some people reference it in that. Do you have a difficult time combining the two sometimes, especially when you're speaking to others? Because you're kind of doing a combination of both.
I think it is the principles are still the same. The principles that you govern by in the Christian world is not for Christians, it's for everyone. Principle, we may put a label on it, call it Christianity, but they're ancient books older than Christianity. The principles are still there that they talk about in Christianity. When you look at the I Ching and all these other, the book of Hindu religion, they're much older than the Christian religion, and yet principles transcend from the beginning to here. So it doesn't, to me, it's not a stretch. You may not quote scriptures, but it's the same. It's the same thing, It's the same thing. I was trained in corporate America, and the principles that they were telling me about, I grew up with. I would be looking at them going, wow, but it's the same thing, So
I just find it interesting on how you're able to do it. I don't want to hijack your show. I don't feel like I'm hijacking. I want to make sure that your brother gets mad that I do that all the time. I'll go on to his, and all of a sudden it's like, and I just take over. So
no, I want to make sure that I actually like this because it gives my listeners a chance to get to know who I am. I get to interview people and stuff like that, but no one has really ever interviewed me per se, so I think this is great for me. I love it.
No, I find it intriguing because here's the thing. There's a lot of information, and what happens is when people go ahead and say, hey, listen, I'm going to take a time out on my own, a lot of people are not going to understand it. And unless you take a deep dive and are willing to be open, and I'm talking about open on the reason why you decided to do it. You don't have to tell them about the journey. I mean, that's your thing. Because the journey, even if you journaled it, it's your journey. Only thing that what I would like to know is when you're going through the journey, what happens within the first 2 weeks? What happens within the first month? Because I can't imagine if you're accustomed to being in a relationship, just using that as an example, on how it's not easier just to pick up the phone and say, hey, let me go be back with whoever. No, seriously. And it doesn't have to be in a sexual way. That's not what I'm referring to. But being, having that, even that intimate conversation, because if that's what you're accustomed to doing, How is the difficulty week one? Is it kind of like a recovering junkie?
Yeah.
A recovering alcoholic?
It is. And because the principles are the same that you have to implement in relationships that you're overcoming something. And so, yeah, there were times when, I could have picked up the phone and called this person and call that person and all of those different things. And it was difficult, especially the lifestyle that I was living was all about partying and the scene and all that type of stuff. And it was hard. I'll give you a story about that because
the party's really good. I can tell you're smiling so big every time you mention.
We were out. We were out partying and whatever, and girls would come and hit on me and stuff like that. I'll give you these are actually that would happen, and I would look at them and they'd say, trying to hit on me. I said, hey, I'm not available at this time, but my friend over there, and I actually a couple of my friends, I send them, gifts in other words, and so that's how I would navigate it somewhere else. And I would tell that person, I'm unavailable because, and I would engage and tell them, this is what I'm doing. And they, of course, would be like, wow, that's really interesting and so forth. But again, that journey, I wanted to know who is this guy? Who is this father of 4 boys? Because at the time I had 4 boys. Who is he? How is he going to now be able to guide these young men? What is he going to be doing and stuff like that? Because the great responsibility, and I would tell them, I said, as far as you and I'm being your father, you had no choice about that. But to be your friend, you have to, and I taught them about the different types of friendship that comes your way. And so you have to know who presents themselves before you at that time so that you don't get hurt or you can only give this and that. Because each and every one of us, Jay, I believe, have scotomas. Scotomas are your blind sides. And so people come into your life through friends, relationships, and so forth, and they will see some of those scotomas that you do not see. And they will point it out to you. And most of us will respond by yelling and screaming, but when we step back, if you're interested in growth and you step back and you look at it, you may start saying, the conversation will change. Say, you know what? They're right. How am I going to deal with this now? How am I going to not conquer? How am I going to learn how to manage this behavior, this attitude? How am I going to replace it with a better attitude than that and help me to propel myself further out? And so I love meeting people and friends and stuff like that because they point out those scotomas to you pretty quickly. If you have a good friend and say, man, you'll hear your friend call you all kinds of pretty names because they're seeing things. And I usually ask him, I said, look, man, what do you see? Let me know so I can bring it to the forefront of my thought life so that I learn how to manage this and change my way so that I can be better and our relationship could be even deeper, So
how did you get to the point that you were able to distinguish between acquaintances and friends? Because there's a huge thing. I mean, you talk a lot about the party scene. Mm-hmm. So you had to be able to make the determination where somebody was able to tell you the difference between the two. Because if somebody's telling you, hey, you have this and you need to get rid of this problem, were you able to determine if they were a friend or an acquaintance?
By how they speak, when people...
We are talking the 90s here. You know this, right?
Yeah. If you let someone, usually, and my friends will tell you I'm pretty observant, I'll let someone talk. And once they begin to talk, you will begin to, you'll get a chance to measure them. You'll get a chance to know how deep this person is, where they're at. And based on that information from what they're telling me, because usually when I meet someone, I'll throw in a probing question here and there, pull out a response to see certain things. And based on that information, then I can make a decision where am I going to place this person in that list of friendship. And it's usually a probing question here and there out of nowhere. And then they'll come back and answer that question based on, and then you go from there.
No, I was just curious because here's the thing, because as we speak in now time, easy for a lot of people to say, well, well, you need to do this and you need to do that and so on. Friend, acquaintance, social media follower, somebody I just met 5 seconds ago. So that's the reason I asked.
Yeah, we give them too much importance.
I mean, it has to be interesting, especially if you're somebody who lets anything or anyone impact what you have going on, because there's a lot of people like that as well. And it just depends on your environment or what you're accustomed to.
And I think it's also what you want. What is it do you want to know about you? And friends that I have around me are friends that are lifetime friends, because I know they will, if they see me behaving a certain way, they will pull me aside and address it and say, hey, I noticed this about you. What's happening? And I have friends that are people that are acquaintance that I have some of the best time going on a picnic and enjoy, but that's to the level that we have that relationship. And then there are those that will sit down and we have the in-depth conversation about the secrets of life. Yes,
a picnic. I don't even know when was the last time I went on a picnic. What the hell? No, I'm just kidding. Now I have to ask you this because you mentioned it earlier, and I want you to shoot straight with me. When you were telling people that you were not available because you were going through a sequence of events of doing X, did you ever give them the date that you were coming to an end? I'm just asking. I'm curious.
No, I didn't.
November the 15th is my date.
I had given myself a year, and I actually went past the time that I had given myself, and I actually remember exactly where I was when I came off that sabbatical. I was playing pool, I was shooting pool, and with my friends, and I looked at them and I said, I think I'm done. and that's it.
So it wasn't one of those things that you looked across the room while you were playing pool and you go, okay, I think I'm done. If you know what I'm saying.
Well, it was exactly like that.
But here's the thing. When you decide to come off of it, though, and you say you're going to move forward, and now you're ready to, we'll say, interact into having personal, we'll say, I don't know if I want to call it intimacy because it's not intimacy, but it's a different level of personal relationship with somebody else. How hesitant are you the first time around? How hesitant are you going into this?
I was pretty hesitant. It took me probably another year or so, maybe a little even longer, because I find, again, in conversation, as you begin to listen to people, you'll see what I considered this one of the most dangerous things that people have within them, and that is low self-esteem. And if you let someone talk enough, you'll figure it out. I've met some of the most beautiful women and men that have the lowest self-esteem. And so if you have a low self-esteem, someone will come and abuse you. And whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever, because then you are looking to that person for validation. And so because you're looking to them for validation, they can do anything to you and you're validated. And so I find that when I began to listen to the conversation, I would realize that this person is not there yet. And for me to engage in a relationship with that would be absolutely detrimental to the relationship. It's not going to go anywhere because I've already gone through some of that. And that journey, like I said, is something that individual will have to embark upon and bring there. So it clears out a lot of, you see it just from a conversation. You have that conversation as a probing question, and then you could see it. And I've watched so many people get hurt because of that low self-esteem. And all the young people today, my hope is that they begin to search themselves and trust themselves and learn how to walk and become stronger in themselves than to be dominated by that low self-esteem because of all the other things that they see on the Facebook, on the YouTube, all the other places that people are saying, you need to look like this, you need to talk like this, you need to act like that. Find your individualness and exploit it to the best of your ability because you're one of a kind.
I have to tell you, I don't know where else would be a better place to end it. I think that there's not going to be a better point that you and I can make together besides what you just said right
and
now.
I appreciate this because this is the first time someone have actually interviewed me, and I think my listeners would get it.
I didn't mean to turn it on you. I really didn't. It just happens. I have this gift of gab.
Well, I deeply appreciate it because I think it brings to my space, a different spin. I think people will get a better insight as to who I am, so that when I interview them, when they listen to my podcast, that they know that, hey, this is not someone just throwing up some stuff, whatever, but I've been through this and I have gained this information from and placed in my computer. And my goal at my show is to talk to other people and have them share what they have gained in their computer. And we, as a whole, began to lift up each other and change each other's lives, man. So I appreciate it, Jay.
Well, it sounds like you're doing it. It definitely sounds like you're accomplishing that.
Everyone who's listening to this podcast, we hope to continually help you to learn how to embrace moments of darkness, because it is in the darkness that we learn how to develop and use our abilities to truly see those parts of ourselves, often invisible to us, in the light. It becomes your responsibility to navigate through all of your trials, to find out who you truly are and begin your journey to loving yourself, which is possibly one of the most difficult things you will ever do in your life. To love yourself and to find the real you. But always remember to enjoy the journey. Thank you for coming by. Please subscribe. And if you can support us financially, we deeply appreciate it.